It's spring. It's actually really early spring. The snowdrops are starting to bloom. Crocuses, daffodils, and tulips are just starting to come up. And it's not quite time yet to do spring pruning on shrubs, but we are going to do a little bit of pruning today. The best time to prune early blooming spring shrubs is the month or two after they bloom. We can also prune them while they're in bloom, and we can also prune them in the month or so before they bloom. The flower buds are breaking dormancy and ready to go a month or so before they really go into full bloom. And by pruning them now, we can take some indoors into a vase and enjoy them inside. We can also take some inside when they're in full bloom and enjoy them inside. But right now we can get an early start on spring when it's the late winter time, when we really are getting kind of anxious to get out and do something in the garden. We can do this very early spring pruning. Now, most of these early blooming shrubs bloom best on branches that are less than 4 years old. So if we take out at the ground level the biggest 1/4 of the branches or the trunks each year, at the end of 4 years we will have the best full blooming shrub we can get. And by pruning it a month or so after they bloom, we will lose a little bit of fruit or berries, but we'll have the most production over the long run because we'll have the most flowers. We don't want to do any pruning on these plants in the end of summer, early fall, or in the first part of winter, because these plants set their flower buds in the fall or in the late summer, and we don't want to be pruning them off at that time. So we want to let them go until this really late winter, very early spring time. It also helps to know how a particular plant sets its flower buds, where they are on the branches, and so that when you do the pruning, you've cut off branches that are actually going to have flowers. This viburnum, for instance, has large flower bud clusters at the ends of a branch. If the branch ends in a long, funny shaped bud that has like a pair of leaves wrapped around it, those are leaf buds that will not have any flowers. So the only branches we want to prune for this operation is the ones that have the large flower clusters on the end. This lilac has its flower buds in pairs at clusters at the end of the branch. So if there's a branch with only a single bud, it probably isn't a flower bud, although it could be. Most of them are going to be on the pairs of the flower buds at the end of the branch. Forsythias, on the other hand, have their flower buds all arranged along the length of a branch. There may not be any at the last few inches, and there may not be any at the very beginning, but most of them will be throughout the middle of the branch. Now, there will be some long branches that came up last summer that will have no flower buds. It would look like a really great one to put in a vase, but you can see the flower buds are kind of in clusters on the sides of the forsythia branches. So those long ones with only a bud here and there don't have any flower buds. Another good early spring bloomer that you can use for this shrub forcing indoors is the Cornelian Cherry Dogwood. It has bright yellow flower clusters, and it blooms a week or two before forsythia, so it's a very early spring bloomer in the northern areas, and it has edible fruit. And we have a video on the Cornelian Cherry Dogwood shrub, tree, whatever you want to call it, in another spot here, so you should check that out. Aren't these forsythias beautiful? It's nice to have color in the house in the wintertime, and these are surplus flowers that we would have been pruning off the branches in the spring anyway, and so we're getting a little bit more enjoyment out of them. Instead of just being in the landscape, which we still have a bunch in the landscape, we now can have them indoors as well. Now, you can do this to any shrub that's going to be blooming early in the spring, especially if it's one that has a winter dormancy period. And so there's azaleas, lilacs, magnolias, pussy willows, rhododendrons, a whole lot of different plants that you can use for this. Now, the earlier it blooms, the earlier you can bring it indoors. So if it's a March blooming shrub, then you can bring it in maybe January or February. If it's a May blooming shrub, then maybe you can't do this pruning until March. And so you do need to play with it a little bit to see how well it works. If you bring it in too early, then the buds won't work because they haven't had enough cold dormancy. And if you bring it in and put it in too warm of a place, the respiration will cause the plant to evaporate too much water, and it won't continue to send out the buds. They may start out, but then they wilt up. And if you put it in too much bright light, maybe the same thing will happen. So in a cool room, in a bright room, but not direct sun, and make sure that you change the water occasionally. And then on the bottom of the branch, you might need to cut it off occasionally. If you cut it vertically and split it a little bit, that'll help it to be able to absorb more water as well. And this is Jeff with the Greener Pew. Thanks for watching.